Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the 8-Bit Adventures podcast. This is episode 245. I am your host, Sean Hayes, and excuse me, we've got a little bit of a light news week this week. Not really a whole lot after those Black Friday deals. Certainly not a whole lot if you were expecting to get a Nintendo Switch, some model for that, or one of the special Series X's or a PS5. Yeah, not a great Black Friday if you were searching for electronics, for gaming electronics. Yeah, so we got a couple of pieces of news, just some really weird stuff. And then there was another D&D survey that went out, another big survey. So we're going to talk about that. That said, I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving if you are in the US. I hope that you checked out last week's podcast episode and took a look at some of those creators that I mentioned, and showed them a little bit of support. So, why don't we get right into it? Because it is pretty chilly outside, and let's get this done. I don't know what the weather has to do with anything, but it's fine. Whatever. All right, so first up, Emma Majo, or Majo, former IT security analyst for Sony Interactive Entertainment's PlayStation division, is suing and seeking to establish a class action lawsuit for alleged gender discrimination and wrongful termination. This comes sort of on the heels of Jim Ryan issuing that sort of memorandum to Activision Blizzard for the same stuff. So yeah, I know I kind of, mentioned like it was kind of a big deal when console manufacturer calls you out for it, and kind of spoke highly of like keeping each other in check about this. Personally, I feel a little embarrassed that I didn't take a more cynical take on that, and didn't think to think a little more cynically. That yes, this is a rampant problem in tech in general. So, perhaps a little hypocritical on Jim Ryan's part, but we'll see how this shakes out. But that was kind of the big story that's happening right now. Is sort of in gaming news. That's not just 30,000 articles about where to find a PS5. So, yeah, we'll see how this goes. It's essentially alleging just a culture where women were not afforded promotions they deserved, and men were, and that they were paid less. So not, there weren't any claims of, or there were some claims of basic like sexual harassment in the form of sort of like jokes that were made in the workplace. But from a cursory read of the suit, nothing to the degree that was at Activision Blizzard. But it's still a problem. So, as I said, it's workers really have to start pushing, because this is not going to be a problem that gets solved by CEOs and boards of directors. This is going to come from pressure from within. And whether that means that the pressure is getting the word out and then pressure from without, but I don't see that happening for PlayStation because they're massive. Like, they're so much bigger than Activision Blizzard. Like, I don't necessarily see people boycotting PS5s to send Sony a message. Like, I don't see that happening in the same way that people have been leaving, say, World of Warcraft and Hearthstone and other Blizzard properties. So yeah. So yeah, we're starting things off on a high note, but it's important to call things out, and I'm gonna try and keep an eye on things like this that come up to shed some light on them. To it's not the biggest community here, but shedding any light to people and build awareness, it helps. Every little bit helps. So next up is New World, the latest bunch of problems to plague New World, Amazon's MMO. Our gathering bots have now descended upon the servers. And so a lot of complaints are happening. They're tanking the economies because it's like a player-driven economy. So my basic understanding is it's not like you can go just like sell junk to NPCs or whatever. Is like you break stuff down to like do crafting, and the entire economy is driven by like crafting goods and selling them on the auction house, and through like taxes and stuff. So gathering bots are basically taking all of the resources and then throwing the economies all out of whack. I was particularly thought this was noteworthy because the big complaints are people camping fishing nodes. And so we all know how much I love fishing in games. And so that's a big problem. And it's to the point that like people are noting that these are very clearly bots because like they're just automatically running to places that have already been fished out, or just like sitting there and just fishing at like places where there's no fish. And so like going from mining node to mining node where like there's no ore, and like trying to ore and it failing, and then just like running to the next one when like there's clearly nothing there. So like if it was a person, like you'd be able to tell there's no ore at that node, you can skip it, and instead like they're just running to each one and like manually checking. So yeah, once more, just these are things where I think if for whatever reason you're going to decide to build an MMO in 2021, you should have thought of how you're going to deal with these problems that have been around since, say, 2000. I mean, I know at least 2004 because they were definitely in World of Warcraft, but like I would be shocked that they weren't in EverQuest as well. So yeah, hopefully that gets solved really quickly and they figure some way to deal with that so that people that play New World don't have their economies wrecked, because that's kind of a big deal for large-scale games. Next up, Spider-Man. So there's been a little bit of scuttlebutt recently, like Tom Holland saying, oh, I don't want to, after this movie, like I consider this, done, or if I'm 30 years old and I'm still playing Spider-Man, I did something wrong. So Amy Pascal, Pascal, who's a producer for No Way Home, not affiliated with Sony. I want to point that out. She has her own studio that is independent, but sort of gave a little bit of a press release or an announcement. Tom Holland, according to her, will be in at least one more Spider-Man film. And that film will kick off a new trilogy that is still a partnership between Sony and Marvel Studios. No indication that he would be in the two films after. But this is, either it's official or not. I kind of foresaw this, that like now that, Sony's actually working with Marvel and they're figuring out how to do it well, Spider-Man movies are actually like doing pretty well and people are wanting to go see them and then wanting to go back to go see them, and they're doing fairly well, critically, as a superhero film can do. So yeah, they're not gonna let Tom Holland just walk away. They'll just keep throwing more money at him until he says yes. And it's ultimately until they say he's done, or until like they just can't work out a contract. That's just how this goes. Like, and that said, like I appreciate being of the mindset of like, yeah, I did this. I was Spider-Man. I'm okay with walking away. I don't want to work on other projects. That's great. But also, I think, if you really enjoy it, though, like you would already be entitled to more money for being in a fourth Spider-Man film, due to how Screen Actors Guild bylaws work, from what I understand. So, I would take the money for me personally, but I'm not Tom Holland. I don't know what he's got going on, but yeah. So we'll see. It's entirely possible that that the kickoff of the new trilogy, might be that that Spider-Man decides to retire and they introduce Miles Morales maybe in the MCU. I could see that happening, and then having somebody fulfill sort of that role of Spider-Man, but have it be able to be a different actor to come in. So yeah, so that's pretty interesting. Now for the weird news. So yeah. I don't even know how to describe this. So if you weren't aware, Universal has been trying to do sort of their own cinematic universe of Universal monsters. Like sort of the classic monsters. They were trying to build like this like World of Darkness type thing with like, with Dracula and Frankenstein and the werewolf and the mummy and things like that. And it just like it flopped. Like the whole concept failed. Apparently, they're still trying to push this concept, despite the fact that like I think the last iteration was Tom Cruise's Mummy movie that was disastrous. But apparently, there's going to be an upcoming Renfield movie, which Renfield, not really like a major character. He's sort of just like a guy that is sort of obsessed with like blood drinking, and thus like looks up to Dracula and wants to be like sort of Dracula's protege. So the reason why we have Nicolas Cage's big old mugshot up here is he's going to be playing Dracula in this film. He has been cast as Dracula. I don't know what we're doing in 2021. Why? I guess supposedly it's going to be some sort of comedy, which like I think that's how you do it. Like I don't know if you can really do just like straight monster movies anymore and have them have the same impact, especially with Universal monsters. Like a lot of the recent Dracula movies or movies in that vein just aren't good. Dracula 2000 was not good, folks. Van Helsing, not great. Oh, I'm trying to think of what else. I don't even think there's been anything since then, really. But yeah. So we're gonna get a Renfield movie. Nicolas Cage is gonna be Dracula. It's coming full circle from whatever that film he was in, which is probably where this photo's from. Is the one where he thinks he's turning into a vampire, and now he actually is turning into a vampire, or has turned into a vampire. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I'm sure this will be, some sort of Mystery Science Theater 3000 fodder for sure. So here's hoping. Here's hoping. All right. That is going to cover our quickfire news. As I said, it was a really light news week. Most of the articles were like here's how to get a PS5 for Black Friday. Oh wait, they're already sold out, and like that was it. That was it everywhere. So, or there was just stuff talking about like Halo Infinite, of like cheaters in Halo Infinite, and it's like that's not news. That's, whatever. So we are going to transition into our deep dive to talk about that Dungeons and Dragons survey. Okay, so Wizards of the Coast released the other day a very, very long survey. They just wanted feedback. Gosh, it's been 6 years, I think, since they released 5th edition. Possibly even longer than that. It's been a while. And they want feedback on spells that are in the player's handbook. And so what they do is, the reason why it's so long is because they basically list almost every spell in the player's handbook, and they ask how you feel about it. And they sort of rate, it's like a rating system. And then they like go through it again and ask if you've ever cast that spell, like when playing a character, when running the game as a DM, or if you've never, used that spell in gameplay. But they go through pretty much the whole list with some exceptions, like you're not going to find Fireball or Lightning Bolt in there. But like a lot of the weird utility spells are in there, like the cure spells are in there, resurrection spells are in there. There's a lot of high-level spells in there, which I think is an unusual choice, given that the game notoriously does not see a lot of play at high level. So I think that was interesting. I certainly filled it out. So I just wanted to talk about sort of my general thoughts and on what this might mean, and what they could do and what I would like to see. For me, selfishly, what I would like to see, both as a player and as a DM. It was funny for me because like I almost never play spellcasters, with the exception of like technically rangers cast spells. So most of my gameplay has been playing rangers, and a little bit of playing artificer. And so, my experience with spellcasting is either helping other like people who play fullcasters like understand spells, and like what their general usage is, or if there's any weird edge cases, or adjudicating that stuff as a DM. So a lot of it was like, yeah, I've never cast this, I've never cast this, I've never cast this, I've never cast this. And like for a lot of times it was, I've never cast this because this spell does not seem interesting, or this spell seems too niche, or something like that. So yeah, a lot of the spell, I think the player's handbook, and just 5th edition in general, has an issue with spell bloat. And that was like, it already had bloat when it was just the player's handbook and the DM's guide and the monster manual. Like, there are so many spells that are literally like, despite the fact that they tried to condense stuff by doing that up, like building into upcasting spells as part of the spell itself. Like there's no reason that you couldn't have done that for, spells that are slightly different, but really is just, oh, I deal a certain type of damage in a certain shape, and like that's the difference. I think they could have cut down on probably about half the spells in the game, by consolidating a number of them that do that. Like, I don't think there's really a need to have Fireball and Delayed Blast Fireball be separate spells when you could just bake the delayed blasting part into upcasting Fireball. Like, just say that if you upcast Fireball to 7th level, you can then delay when it goes off. There you go. And or chain lightning, right? Like, just have that be a function of lightning bolt. Like, when you upcast it to a certain amount, just say like, oh, when it hits the first thing, it then arcs it, and then you can arc it to something different. There's just a whole bunch of stuff like that. Charm person versus charm monster. If you upcast it to 4th level, or if you cast charm person at 4th level, just say you can have it target monsters. I don't understand. Like, it doesn't feel different enough to me. Or like lesser restoration versus greater restoration. Have that be upcastable. Here's the thing. What this means is it makes a lot of spells. It frees up a lot of space, which helps known spellcasters like sorcerers, like bards, like rangers. But then it also cuts down on page count, right? So if you wanted to trim down the book a bit, because spells easily take up the biggest section of the book. You could cut down on page count, or you could actually make stuff that really is different and does unique and interesting things to make magic feel more magical, as opposed to just, I have 101 ways on how to blow something up with fire damage. And 5 different ways on how to do something, on how to do the same thing with radiant damage, or whatever. So I think that's a big portion. And I mentioned that. There's like a section for what are your thoughts and comments. And I mentioned that in there. Here's another thing. I think healing in particular needs to be rethought for 5th. I think damage and healing needs some sort of rework at this juncture for Dungeons and Dragons. In particular, healing in 5th edition is not potent enough. Like, it's often the case where it's recommended to let party members drop to 0 and then bring them back up with healing, rather than using it to like mitigate damage after the fact, because damage often outpaces healing that you can do. So I don't necessarily know how you would fix that, but I think there needs to be some sort of rework. And I think maybe D&D needs to start exploring other options than just straight up hit points. Which I know that's sacrilege. Can't touch the sacred cows of Dungeons and Dragons. But I think it might be time, even if you just do it as a variant rule, build the game so that you can support a variant rule like that, since there's plenty of other systems that have that as an option, like Cortex, as both hit points and other forms of damage tracks that you can do. Or have a damage track, have it be part of, I don't know. And the problem is, like, when you use hit points, is there's a lot of math involved. There's a lot of just adding and subtracting involved. And for some people, that's asking a lot. And this is not meant to be dismissive, but like, while you're trying to play a game and everything, trying to do math on the fly, there's a reason why stuff like D&D Beyond is so popular for automatically tracking hit points for that. Because a lot of people just don't want to do it. So, I think introducing alternate methods for things, or just beef up healing. Now, granted, I'm coming at this from, I'm going to admit the unthinkable for most Dungeons & Dragons fans. I enjoyed 4th edition D&D infinitely more than 3rd edition D&D. And honestly, I never even really played second edition all that much to form that much of an opinion, but second edition is enough of a hodgepodge of bad mechanics that I can say I enjoy it more than second edition. I would say if I were to get some sort of like 4.5 that's not essentials, that would probably be my favorite, my absolute favorite. Is just like take like a bunch of design concepts from fourth, import them into fifth, and do some redesigning of things. And I think that would be really strong. The reason why I bring this up is I miss the concept of heroic surges. And like Wizards tried to do this with hit dice, and then like just didn't do anything with hit dice aside from like you can spend them during a short rest, which whether you get to take that or not is, chances are you will probably never get to take a short rest. And so like your hit dice are meaningless. And I feel like at a certain point, like you get too many. Is I liked heroic surges because you got like a static amount, and it was partially determined by your class. So like classes that were supposed to be physically tougher got more or more enduring. Got more. I'm sorry, healing surges. Not heroic surge, healing surges. And basically, when you spent a healing surge, you recovered 1/4 of your maximum hit points. It was just a multiplier. And so like your surge value would get recorded on your character sheet, so that you would know, like, and as your maximum hit points would go up, like your surge value would eventually go up, sort of a thing. And a lot of the healing effects were just based on your surge value. So you got so you also started with more hit points in 4th edition, so you got a bigger boost in healing when you actually healed than you often do in 5th edition, where, a first level cure wounds is like a D8 plus ability modifier, which at first level, that could be 100% of your hit points. But by 20th level is nothing. Like that's like nothing. That is you spend that to like prevent some sort of effect that is canceled by magical healing. Or if somebody's down, like then they just pop back up. Again, because of the way hit points work, there's no penalty really aside from if your turn comes around and you're still unconscious, like you're unconscious, of waiting for someone to go down and then healing them back up so that they pop right back up to be fully capable. So you end up just playing like this anti-whack-a-mole game. So that's just something, I miss that, and having sort of that design philosophy baked in. It also allowed you to do better pacing with encounters because there was an actual sense of attrition. Where as your party started to run out of healing surges, you started to run out of healing available. And like truly powerful stuff was like you regain hit points as if you spent surges, but you don't actually spend them. And that's where like cure magic mattered, but it was also very limited use. So I think introducing something like that to make healing spells better, but also like make them relevant and make them better, but also keep methods in where if you don't have somebody that can cast cure wounds, you're not just like gonna play a completely different game. We have noted this with my own group at home, because former podcast co-host Courtney Bolin, her character has the medic feat or the healer feat, whatever it's called, and has been using healer's kits. That, as it turns out, is really nice. Like that's a great example of how you can do like additional healing. I think it's tough having it tied to a feat because like if you're not a human, you have to wait until level 4. There's limited opportunities for it. It doesn't give you an ability score bonus with it. So, and everybody's so focused on, getting your main stat up to 20, it seems. Like, even a lot of casual players, and not like character optimizers are like, yeah, I want to get it up to 20 and then I'll start taking other things. And it's like, because like even if the game assumes that you don't, that like you can play optimally with a 16 in a score, like if that's the case, then people are going to continue to put, like, you really have to make it overkill and like actually be viewed mechanically as overkill in order for people to not like from a character optimization standpoint, to not put those points in the stat and get it all the way up to 20. And do things like I also think like more feats should just be interesting, and I think a lot of feats aren't. And they suffer for it. But anyway, getting back to spells. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is a lot of the spells in the game that deal psychic damage. I think psychic damage just needs to go away. I think it causes a weird disconnect in trying to figure out like what it does, or introduce it so that like it explicitly is non-lethal or does something different than, I don't know, like that if psychic damage reduces somebody to 0 hit points, it does something different than like dropping, than causing a foe to drop dying. Personally, I think they could just get rid of psychic damage, and spells that deal psychic damage do something else. Or if you're going to deal psychic damage, again, have it do something different. And I think the biggest joke, ironically, in like 5th edition, and 4th edition had this too, because this is where it was introduced, is the spell Vicious Mockery, is the cantrip. Everybody's favorite cantrip, Vicious Mockery, in that like you magically make fun of someone and then they take psychic damage, and if they're low enough, like they just die. I think it would be more interesting to have it be some sort of taunt effect, maybe in that like it rattles, like, and the spell does that, like it rattles them. But then maybe add like a different rider than just like, oh, it also just deals damage, because that's how it works. And I would like to see the game maybe introduce more ways of defeating monsters that aren't just like deal damage. Because I think that gets boring after a while. Like, because like with 5th edition, you have some classes, paladins, that can just like, they have so much burst capability that like the combat's going to be over in one round if you just have it just be based on hit points. And like the open secret of DMs that like Wizards owns up to, and former employees of Wizards have claimed this before, is ultimately, if you have to adjust the numbers for your game, then you just like adjust the numbers on the fly and everything. So ultimately, like, the numbers that are printed in the book are loose guidelines at best. So it means like, if you're not going to design a system that works on its own without requiring tinkering with it to do very basic things that is the main focal point of the game, then why does it matter? Like, then why do hit points matter? Why does monster design matter? Like, I mean, why? And ultimately it boils down to just like, well, people like rolling dice, and it's like, well, then have them roll dice and have it matter. I mean, if they're gonna roll a weapon die, like, have each effect on the weapon die do something different, or have it be that if you roll above a certain threshold, it does something, and below a certain threshold, it does something. for something like Vicious Mockery to just be like, oh, I deal psychic damage, and then there's this rider that's attached to it. I think there's a lot more interesting things that could be done. And we see this a lot with like other spells too, like, Hideous Laughter, Irresistible Dance. Like those are things where that could be a psychic effect and there's no damage involved, but like it also incapacitates somebody for a period of time. Do that. Like you could consider Compelled Duel, which I think is it's a little limited and could use some tweaking, but overall like is a great spell for controlling, especially if you're like, if you want to be sort of that questing paladin that like is going and my only regret about that is I feel like it should have been a class feature instead of a spell. And I feel the same way about Hunter's Mark too, is that ultimately I think those two, I feel like Compelled Duel should have been a class feature because like it's something where, because paladins get so much more value out of just burning their spell slots for smiting, like you're not often going to cast Compelled Duel because it's better to just burn your spells through smites. Whereas Rangers, it's like, I mean, why would you cast any other spell than Hunter's Mark? I also noted Ranger, there's too many concentration spells for Rangers where the effect, like, it really doesn't matter until you hit with an attack. And so you could retool the spell so that it goes off, like so that it's just cast as part of an attack, as opposed to like you cast it as a bonus action, then it requires concentration, then the next time you make an attack it goes off. Like if you're gonna have it require concentration and a bonus action to cast, have it be like Zephyr Strike, where it gives you some rider benefit to actually concentrating on it that then goes away when you've used the effect up. Because you see this with Ensnaring Strike, you see this with Hail of Thorns, you see this with Lightning Arrow, all of which are great spells, but you can't cast them along with Hunter's Mark. Like Spike Stone or Entangle or anything like that. And so a lot of times with the Ranger, it's often like I cast one spell this combat and then I can't do anything else besides attack. So it's I was particularly critical of their spells for Rangers because I'm personally biased. But I was also critical, like the same thing happens with the smite spells too for paladins. Like why would you cast a smite spell when it is often better to just use smite? Because again, it requires a bonus action, it requires you to concentrate, and then it functions on the next attack. Like you could have rolled all those various effects into the smite ability, and then once again cut down on page space for spells. Or if the intention was for like other classes to be able to pick it up, then make it useful for other classes. Like, but it's weird in that Wizards also like doesn't build around multi-classing. So then it's like, well, I mean, until like other subclasses got printed that like pick up those smite spells, the only one you had to worry about was Bard. And like, what Bard's going to go around picking up smite spells for the ones that they can pick up? Like, they can pick any spell in the game with that stuff, with their magical secrets. Why are they going to pick like low budget tier smite? I don't know. I think ultimately it's they bloated a lot of the spells out to replicate things that had previously been class features, either in third edition, either in second, third, or fourth edition, that might have been better served by just including them as class features. And it's especially frustrating when there's so many class features baked in that are bad. I don't know any other way to describe it, but just that are bad. Mostly some of the ones in the base Ranger that either are way too situational or require burning one of your precious spell slots to do something that's like not helpful. When I don't know, I feel like it's like, I don't know, have it be a reduced tier commune with nature instead of doing some weird stuff involving favorite enemies. But yeah, I would encourage. Oh, it also allows you, so at the end of the survey, it allows you to pick 5 spells of your choosing that weren't in the list and to rate them as well. And that's where I picked stuff. I don't know if I put Charm Person in there. And I am kind of kicking myself for that because I thought it was elsewhere in the survey. I think charm spells in particular, charm spells very controversial in this day and age. I think the issue is that there needs to be like some disclaimer text or further explanation in the charm spells, because the intent is that that it's the creature regards you as a trusted ally. This does not mean that you override the creature's free will. So there's a lot of concern over like consent and agency, especially if it's a player casting it on another player character, casting it on another player character. It gets into some, there's a lot of concerns about that. Basically, using it as a form of mind control. And the design intent is it's not. Like, it's a first level spell. It is not designed to be mind control. It is designed to be conflict avoidance. So it's designed, or for somebody to give you a better deal on something. What this means is that regarded as a trusted ally, there's rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide for what sort of stuff, like general categories of like what requests and things people are willing to fulfill or do, depending on how friendly they are to you. And this just means that like you turn something that is potentially hostile or unfriendly up to friendly, or higher than friendly. But like this doesn't mean that they just throw all of their principles away, or that they just suddenly like become like a thrall to you. Like that's not what that is. And unfortunately, I think either from shows and podcasts that like tend to play a little looser with the rules, let anything happen, or if it's just because it's not explicitly spelled out that way and you have to sort of read around things. There has been sort of this thought process, I guess, or just this general concern that this is what charm spells are for. And so I think maybe spelling things out a little bit more. Like I think with something like charm, with the sensibilities that we have in 2021, that is an example where you need to be a little clearer and not just sort of loosey-goosey, oh well this is up to the DM to do what they want sort of thing. No, I think in that case you need to be a bit stricter in what that spell does, and maybe include a sidebar of like, this is not what the spell is for, and reminders of like, yeah, this doesn't mean that you just get to tell somebody to go do something and they will go do it. Like they can still say no. This isn't like suddenly, like if an enemy casts Charm Person on a player, like they don't suddenly turn on their friends and start attacking their friends, like unless they secretly don't like their friends and we're looking for an excuse. Like, and that's what it is. Like, it doesn't make you betray your principles. It just means that the person casting it is now your friend. And I've talked about this before. There's plenty of cases where, in real life, if a trusted friend asked you to do something that would betray one of your principles or cross the line, like, you'd probably still say no. And I think that's where, like, there's this belief, I guess, that I keep seeing pop up here and there, where, like, charm person basically gets people to, like, take away the ability to say no. And that's not what it does. What you're looking for there, that is dominate person. And that is a much less gray area in dominate person is bad. Like, that is bad. And I think maybe even just, like, including sidebars to things like that and just say, hey, if you're going to play with this spell, you need to think carefully and make sure that you talk to people about what they're okay with, right? Because, again, at the end of the day, it's a game that is played cooperatively with the players and the DM. So it may be a case where there is an agreement where, the players want to be challenged a little bit. And so they're okay with the DM having a bit more of an adversarial role where they're designing challenges specifically to throw at the players to make things exciting. But it should never be like open open conflict, I would guess. Like, unless that is agreed upon by the players and the DM, and that's what they're looking for. To have it essentially be asymmetrical gameplay. But yeah, I think that's an example of where the game could define things a lot better and should define things a lot better. And I think I don't know, is maybe I don't know. Because there's a lot of examples of people just talking about, like, oh, necromancy is not all that bad. Like, enchantment's so much worse than necromancy. And maybe include, like, what exactly is your intent? Like, from a designer's perspective, what is the intent? And that's something I kind of miss. Because, like, 3rd edition and some of the books in 4th edition actually had a great job at, like, doing little sidebars and stuff of, like, here's what we were thinking when we did this. And, like, here's some tips and suggestions and things. They do that for Unearthed Arcana, but, like, it seems to be missing a lot in 5th edition books. And it'd be great to have, like, a little sidebar for things like enchantment and say, like, here's what the intent is for enchantment spells. If you need help trying to figure out why heroes would be using this kind of magic. So yeah. But yeah, mostly I think the game could just consolidate a lot of the spells that they have. I think there's, even in the player's handbook, there's too many superfluous things. But I also, I'm coming at it from, I remember when there were source books that had, I mean, psionics was sort of built this way in 3rd edition, as well as epic spells, where you would essentially build a spell or an effect, and then you could, like, change, like, by spending different costs, either different spell slots or whatever, or power points for psionics, you could, like, change something slightly. So, like, you could change the damage type. You could make it from like a 30-foot radius to a 60-foot cone, you know, or something like that, and drastically change that stuff. You know, I think if Wizards didn't want to necessarily build that into the spells themselves, I mean, then maybe just like have a very basic, I don't know, have maybe meta magic take care of it. Like, take meta magic out of being a sorcerer only thing, reintroduce it as something that like any meta magic feels like an arcane magic thing, and have that be in there. You know, have shape spell be like you can change, you know, the size of a spell. You know, that if you wanted to make it, you know, a 30-foot cone or a 15-foot radius or something. But ultimately, or have generic stuff like energy ball, right? Or elemental burst, say. And I feel, unfortunately, I feel like that ruffles too many feathers from a lot of people who are like, it's D&D, you gotta have fireball. When in fact, like, except what if it was basically fireball, but you could instead deal thunder damage, fire damage, cold damage, or acid damage, right? Like, and those were all possible. Like, and it was just, you were channeling elemental energy and it goes and it explodes. You know, or, you know, for lightning bolt, like, what if you could choose lightning or necrotic? Like, instead of witch bolt being a first level spell that is kind of terrible, just have it be the necrotic version of lightning bolt and just call it bolt. You know, I mean, it's just like, or the number of times that the game, you know, has like two very different spells that achieve the same purpose in different ways for different classes because of themes. So like, druids don't get lightning bolt because they get call lightning. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's just ways to deal lightning damage in an area. The area is different and they function differently, but like, I don't know. I feel like there could be different stuff. Like, make them more different. You know, and change the names up. Like, have it be like, have it just be storm. Like, you cast a storm spell. And also have it like rain down and, you know, do other things. And have lightning bolt, like, call it bolt and have it do weird stuff. Like, bring back the bouncing part of it. So that, like, if you're casting in a small room, like, it ricochets off of areas. Yeah. I also want them to, I guess, just like, it feels like 5th edition was a response to 4th edition's very technical writing of spells, where like it was designed to just fit on a little card. And so it only listed the absolute basic amount of information that you needed. And the intent was like that if you wanted to add flourishing stuff or whatever, it was flavor text, didn't matter, fill it in. And like, it sort of kept that, but then was like, oh, well, that's too basic. So we got to add some stuff in, but we don't want to add too much in and go like in the direction of 3rd edition where, you know, everything was very verbose and spelled out and every little thing had to be cataloged, to the point that like it's putting it on the DM to decide, like, I mean, does Scorching Ray light things on fire? Because it doesn't say it does. You know, this is, and I don't know off the top of my head if the spell says that it lights things on fire or if it doesn't, but like, there are individuals who will argue that if a spell deals fire damage, but it does not say it lights things on fire, will argue that it doesn't light things on fire because the spell doesn't say that it does. And it puts it on your group to sort of collectively decide, like, well, okay, it should light things on fire because it deals fire damage. Like that's what it does. Or, you know, I also wish there were sort of some, like, I wish that like on fire was like a condition, right? It's sort of like poisoned or restrained or whatever, and that more things did it, right? Because that's a trope that you see in fantasy a lot, and like it's there is almost no penalty unless you're at really low levels for being on fire in Dungeons and Dragons. To the point that like when you're higher level, like you might as well just like if you get lit on fire, just stay lit on fire because then you'll look cool, and two, like it's a d6 of damage every turn until it gets put out. Chances are, like, I don't know, you are going to take far more damage than that from, you know, swords, like just regular swords. Whereas like being on fire is bad, like it's really bad. Like you should not be on fire. You know, do interesting, like acid could reduce armor class, like it could eat away at natural armor or eat away at armor. I think poison needs help. I mean, there's so many things in the game that are just immune to poison straight up. I don't know. It's also like that's not how poison works in the real world. Like, I mean, something that utilizes venom does not necessarily have resistance or immunity to even its own venom. Like, I mean, so I can't say for certain. It's been a while since I pontificated about reptiles quite a bit, but like I'm pretty sure that if a rattlesnake bites another rattlesnake, like that's still bad. I mean, it was like spiders bite other spiders. Not great for the spider that got bit. So I think unless you're going to do so, like undead, you know, it could make sense. But I don't know. There's probably still, you know, toxins that you could develop that specifically target undead. And then like, what do you do then? Right? But yeah, I mean, but if you do a damage overhaul, then you don't have to worry about that. So who knows? So that's sort of what I would like to see from the result of this survey. And just that, like, if maybe, just maybe, we could get some more interesting spells in whatever next edition of the Player's Handbook they do, and not just, I don't know, 42 versions of I throw a tiny fireball of stuff. I throw a tiny ball of fire and it does things. Because it's like we got Produce Flame, we got Firebolt, we have Create Bonfire, which isn't in the Player's Handbook, but you know, Dancing Lights, Fireball, Scorching Ray, Burning Hands, Delayed Blast Fireball, Fire Shield, Wall of Fire. You know, I don't know. I would say if Wizards was going to be real brave, right? If they were going to be real brave, is they would go like the White Wolf route and make like more generic spell archetypes, and then have it be and to utilize like maybe skills a little bit more, and have it be that like if you know that, like have it be like pyromancy, right? This I would also be totally okay with them doing away with Vancian magic. But have it be that like you know the pyromancy spell, and that allows you to just control fire or produce fire effects. And so spending spell slots or power points or just making skill checks or whatever to produce various effects, and depending on your check result, it does certain things. Or you can, maybe if you get a bad result, you know, it's only half as effective, or you only, that sort of stuff. And, you know, if you still want it to deal damage, have it be a set amount of damage, and you can overclock it, or, you know, cut back on damage to do additional effects or something. I don't know if that makes it too complicated for the average D&D player, but I think that also might be easier than having to know what, like, 47 different spells do, on the off chance that, you know, they might do slightly different things, but in very crucial ways. So yeah. Oh, another example, like wind walk versus water walk. Like, just have it be walk. Like, have a like a some kind of levitation spell that's not, you know, and maybe tie in levitate in there. But just have it be like, oh yeah, you start off by like being able to walk on water, then you can walk on wind, and then you can walk on clouds, and then you can just like fly or something. Or teleporting. Right? It's Misty Step, Dimension Door, Teleport. That's all in a progress. Yeah. In a progress? No. That's like in a clear progression. Misty Step is 2nd level. Dimension Door is 4th, I think. It's 3rd or 4th. I think Teleportation Circle is like 5th or 6th, and then Teleport 7th. Like, that's a clear. Let's just have it be a teleport. Have the base version be Misty Step, and then you can upgrade it. Telekinesis. Like, that should be, like, telekinesis, there should be a much smaller version that you can do at lower levels, that you can then upgrade into the full version of the spell. So yeah. That's just what I'm hoping for. We'll see. Until then, maybe I'll just build some of this stuff for Jamora. You know, just create my own spells that do these things, and hope that people pick them. You know, maybe do minor telekinesis, minor teleport, and just build it out myself so that you can upcast, so that nobody will ever have to take Misty Step or Dimension Door or whatever again, because you can just teleport. So that it ends up that people just know a bunch of 1st level spells, because you can just upcast everything. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what the results of that survey are. I think this is very clearly playing into sort of this whole revamp that they're thinking of doing for 5th edition, as sort of a 5.5 but not 5.5 that's coming soon. But yeah, I'm a little excited. I'm a little hopeful. And I say that because I am taking a bit of cynicism with the community, where there are sizable portions of the community that wish like everything would return to 1st edition, for better or worse. So who knows? And that's back when, you know, there were like 17 different schools of magic instead of the 8 that we have now. So yeah. All right. I've talked long enough about that. Let's do some quest log really quick. All right, so quest log. So the goal was to color 2 comics. I can say that I have done that. So the next comic up to get colored is 8-Bit Adventures, World 1 comic, or Chapter 1 comic 80. So that means 21 comics left, I believe, to get from 80 to 100. The goal is to finish that out by the end of the year. So in order to do that, gotta kick it up. Can't just do color 2 comics a week. So the goal, and this is going to be a big goal, will be to do 7 comics. So my goal is to try and get 1 done each day. And if I can do that, then I will finish with like a week left. So here's hoping Here's hoping. We're gonna try and make it happen, folks. We're gonna try and get that book done. Because we're so close. We're so close. And here's the thing: if we don't, it's okay. You know, we tried. We did pretty well. I will say we are closer to finishing this than I am of completing my living Pokedex. And we're pretty close on that. There's only about like 45 Pokemon left out of the 800 plus now. So, and most of them actually, I could, if I got the Diamond Pearl remakes, I could finish it up really easily, since most of them are from Gen 4 that I'm missing. Yeah, so the goal is to try and do 7 more comics by next podcast. So we'll see how that goes. And that is going to wrap up the show for this week. Thank you all for joining me, whether you are watching this live on Twitch or whether you are listening as the audio podcast version. If you would like to see more content from 8-Bit Adventures, you can check out the website over at 8-bitadventures.com. You can check out the comics, artwork, podcasts, back episodes of the other ones still exist. Stream VODs, all that good stuff. If you would like to help support that content, the best way to do that is you can become a patron over at patreon.com/8bitadventures. For as little as $1 a month, you can get early access to comics. It's like at least 3 weeks ahead of time. So like it's kind of meaningful. And if I can keep getting 2 comics done every Sunday, like that is just going to get longer and longer. So you can see comics early, as well as there's like some special playtest content for Tales of Jamora, like early look content, is sort of behind the scenes content for Jamora, namely a lot of subclasses that I'm working on or spells and things like that. And again, little as $1 a month. Big shout out and thank you to all of the current patrons. Thank you for your support, for your continued support. Every little bit helps. Every little bit means a lot to me. So thank you for that. And finally, our opening theme is One Up by the illustrious Professor Shy Guy. You can find his work over at professorshyguy.bandcamp.com. For those that don't know, he is a chiptune artist that does both original work, like One Up, which has both instrumental and vocal versions. But he also does covers of some songs. So he's got a lot of great stuff that's available. With that, we're all set. Show's over. Go home. No, as always, have fun, happy gaming, and enjoy your pie cake.